Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, rivalry week, it was everything we hoped it would be. Not the best weekend for flags at midfield, specifically planting them, the act of and the events that occurred afterwards. But a great,
it's like a real life game
week
of capture the flag, like Halo, Call of Duty style. It's like, wait, you can't put that flag there. It's like there's nothing new anymore, man. It's like we get a trend that happens. It happens 2 or 3 times, and we see people watching the news, and they're like, "Those guys got the cops called. I think I can get the cops called."
And to be clear, if we want to debate the ethics of flag planting, and we're going to get to Mike Norvell, who had himself an interesting Saturday, needless to say. It's worse if you just let the flag sit there. If you're a player and a coach, and you can't just be like, "Well, I guess they got us pretty good." And I understand everybody's like, "Well, don't. If you beat them, a team, then you won't have to worry about having your flag planted." How about we just not plant flags in general? I don't know. Baker did it, and it looks really cool when he did it. So
that was fire. That's the thing. That's an original work of art. Leave that be. No need for the remix.
Yeah. All right. We will not just talk flag planting, I promise. We have an SEC championship set. In case you haven't heard, Texas wins the semifinal game at Kyle Field. We have Texas and Georgia in a rematch SEC championship. We, of course, will preview all of that during the week. I would probably guess we're going to see at least 3 SEC teams in the field with potential for 4 after South Carolina beats Clemson and the Syracuse-Miami thing happens. TBD on Alabama's playoff status. I'll get to my frustration with that in a bit. But we have 10 games to get through, and then we're going to try and rank the CFP top 12 at the end, or at least what we think it's going to look like on Tuesday. Let's start with the SEC semifinal game that we had in College Station on Saturday night. It was so great to see Texas and Texas A&M play football again. But Texas goes into Kyle Field, and you know what? The scoreboard's not going to say this. I'm going to say the Texas defense pitched a shutout because they did. They did. A&M's lone touchdown was the pick 6. I thought the Quinn Ewers.
Furthermore, they got put in a horrible position with the punt block, and they gave up 0 points.
Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. An unbelievable performance by that Texas defense, because you would think if you're Texas and you can only score 17 points and you have 2 red zone turnovers, usually that's a bad omen, especially if we're trying to win on the road, trying to win a big time game. But I thought at that point, when the punt block happened, A&M's about to pull the LSU script. This is another instance where they're down double digits and they come back, and man, that atmosphere just felt it. And instead, we see the goal line stand. Ethan Burke just blows up that play in the backfield for that stop, 4th and goal. And that's kind of all she wrote. And that was pretty much the game. It was a championship defensive performance by Texas. A&M's offense at Kyle Field, 244 yards of offense. 0 for 3 on 4th down, just nothing doing for the A&M offense against Texas defense that, look, if it's not the best in the country, it's at least in the conversation for it. What PK has done this year, dude, that group, they just get after it, and they can beat you. They can beat you no matter where they're being asked to go get a stop. They just have dudes at every single level. Well, think about this. 211 passing yards was the most that Texas allowed in the regular season. Okay, TBD on what that's going to look like.
And in modern football, that's minuscule, honestly.
It's unreal. And think about all the time that Texas has played with a lead, too. And 211 passing yards. It was the Kentucky game. It was Cutter Boley coming in the second half. Yeah.
Wow. And that's
Michigan
exactly to your point. When you're trailing for a whole game, you're just chucking up passes. 2 guys fall down, and you give up 150 passing yards.
Well, think about this. Texas's 2 worst games against the pass were games in which the quarterback got benched. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know, I don't know.
This is so nasty.
Yeah, and Marcel Reed did not get benched in this one. They did not go. They did not go with the backup quarterback Connor Wigman. In this sense, I only had to hear Chris Fowler incorrectly pronounce his name once at the open. But think about this too. I don't know where this is going to rank historically, but it's going to be up there. Texas's defense allowed a 4-18 TD to INT ratio in the regular season. 4-18.
Goodness, man.
Diego Pavia had half of those passing touchdowns too.
Prime Diego Pavia, man. Yeah, and I'll say too, man, considering what they lost last year, with the D tackles, with even losing
Sweat
Joe
Murphy.
Davis, right? Like the way that it was about, built not bought, we're developing these guys, and when you lose those guys, it's really hard to replace that leadership in the locker room and on the coaching staff. And they have stayed on one page, getting Colin Simmons and stuff involved. Like they truly have a great defensive culture at Texas. Guess what, Connor? Texas now in 2 back-to-back conference championships. Are they?
I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it. We will. I promise. I have that in the notes. We're going to get to it.
Mm-hmm.
You're exactly right. And if you're still disrespecting Texas at this point, it's probably because you just think that they should be scoring 42 points every game. And maybe that relates to whether or not Texas can win a national championship. That's a fair discussion to have. But Texas kind of feels like a throwback team in a lot of different ways. They are perfectly fine winning a game 17-7, kind of sitting on you in the second half. And look, they have a quarterback who probably gets too much attention for all the reasons that were associated with his recruiting and the big time wins that he's had. And so he's had these big time moments. And while I still think Quinn Ewers has put himself in that conversation to be considered a Texas legend, it still is just part of what Texas is doing at this point and why they're at this place now playing for an SEC championship in year one in the conference. But like, if your entire opinion of Texas is just based around Ewers, I would challenge you to look elsewhere, specifically on the offense. Look at what Trey Wisner did. Trey Wisner was a guy that was kind of like, that's what they're going to have to turn to in the preseason when they're dealing with all these injuries in the backfield. And this was a guy who's probably going to be a special teams player. And even throughout the year, he's a little bit more of a change of pace back. But then Jaden Blue has the fumbling issues. I know that Jaden Blue said this week that he was walking around campus with a football. Love that. That's, hey.
Paid off.
Yeah, I mean, what do you have, like 5 touches in this game? Didn't fumble.
Right.
I don't think, at least. Didn't lose one. Sark basically said, I need a bell cow.
Securing the ball, the touchdown.
Yeah, that's true. That catch was really impressive. Quinn Ewers just put that in a perfect spot, corner of the end zone. How about the fact that, Texas's 2 touchdowns in this game were both plays that I think on the field
overturned.
Were initially not ruled touchdowns and then overturned. Game of inches. It really, really was. And Texas, by the hair of its chinny chin chin, was able to find ways to score touchdowns in those spots. But like, I'm so impressed with Wisner. The broadcast crew was gushing about him by day's end, and it's hard not to. 33 carries, 186 yards. He one-upped his career high from last week when he had 26 carries against Kentucky. But the things that guy did, so shifty, just frustrated that A&M defense. They could not bring him down. A&M also couldn't stop Arch Manning. 4th and 2. Little Arch.
That guy, man. I
shouldn't say
what he's going to do with this offense.
How about that wrinkle? Because now every game moving forward for Texas, including obviously the SEC championship and now the playoff, which they are in the playoff, there's no doubt about it. But every defense moving forward has to prepare for Arch. You just
That's
have to.
Dream, bro. You can legitimately say, we don't know. Well, we probably got to prepare for both.
4th and 2, you got a package for him. You got certain things that you can roll out and use that mobility. And really nice play by Arch too, to get the edge and to be able to extend to get the pylon. That was big time for him in that moment when Texas was knocking on the door. But yeah, I just think Texas is so tough to prepare for. And if you're saying, well, Georgia, look at what Georgia did. Sure, go replicate Georgia's plan. Go find a Jalen Walker on your defense. Go get a cornerback that's going to play as well as Dalen Everett did that night. Go do that. I challenge you. Good luck. Good luck, all these teams. Maybe somebody's going to beat Texas. Okay, I'm not sitting here saying that they're invincible, but it is so difficult to try and find ways to beat this team for 60 minutes. Because also think about the fact that they lost Kelvin Banks. They lose Kelvin Banks in this game. Their stud left tackle, who's going to be a first-round pick, didn't appear too serious.
Sark is in like some weird version of the Twilight Zone, man. Like we've talked about this for weeks on end, how it feels like he's just getting through levels of a game and it just keeps getting harder for him. It's like, well, okay, now all you had that was consistent was your offensive line. No, this guy's out. And I just keep thinking about it and smiling. And to your point with the running backs, it's like, it's all about the quarterback. No. We are going to run through a MF or face, to quote Marshawn Lynch. It's going to be 47 carries. We are going to move the ball. And then, you see Blue with the great touchdown. Like, I'm looking up and down kind of the box score here and seeing these guys that we thought would be impactful, like Bond, Niblack that just aren't really a factor, but they're still getting touches in these games. He's building like this island of misfit toys out of this offense. And to your point, I think that's a great summation. This is a defensive team. I mean, I think straight up at this point in the season, this is a defensive team. And if they can protect the football, i.e. not have Quinn Ewers throw a little Peyton Manning duck out there in the playoff game, I kind of like how it's one of those, it's like you can't fake desperation. And they've had all kinds of it this year.
And if they can protect Quinn, that's huge. And they did in this game. If you had told the Texas A&M defensive line, you're going to have Calvin Banks leave this game early, and all we talked about this week with Quinn Ewers' ankle, knowing what A&M does so well up front, you think that's advantage Aggies. In that building, they're going to be flying off the ball. Ewers is going to be a sitting duck back there. He got sacked once, and they had 0 quarterback hurries. That's getting it done. That is finding ways to be able to get it done. Texas just doesn't blink, continues to make that Georgia defensive showing that it had in Austin that much more impressive when you look back on it. And I'm glad that we're getting this rematch, because while it's been all over the place this year trying to figure out who the 2 best teams in the SEC are, these are the 2 teams that I want to see play again. I want to see what it looks like, and not just because I predicted them to play 3 times and this is going to be the second and we're on our way to fulfilling that prophecy. But for now, this is the matchup that I think is fun to see. And I do think that what they should both be able to do from an adjustment standpoint is going to be fascinating. And we'll talk all about this game in the midweek pod, so we won't get too in-depth with it now. But thinking about all the things that Georgia did wrong that day on the offensive side of the ball, and what can they correct? What can they do differently? And if Texas is able to make those adjustments and beat Georgia, knowing what they struggled with last time, all of a sudden, I think even the last people who are not on the Texas bandwagon yet will certainly hop on.
Yeah.
Can I say
right
it?
There with you. It's a rare, complete team in a year that there are very few of them. And yes, to your point, like I said, 2 back-to-back, they won the Big 12 last year. They're now in the SEC championship game. Texas is
back. Texas is back, folks. Texas is back, folks. They outscored SEC teams by 100 points. Okay? They got a favorable draw. They did. They really did. We will acknowledge that. We acknowledge that in the preseason. We're acknowledging that now. It is a favorable SEC draw. They did not play Bama. You're forgetting that. That was
sorry. You're sorry. I was thinking of Georgia played Texas, and you're right.
Didn't play Tennessee. Didn't play Ole Miss.
My
bad. Didn't play South Carolina. Yeah, they got a favorable draw. Let's call it what it is. It is a perfectly favorable draw. But they also got to Atlanta in the first year of this 16-team super conference. Okay, they avoided the letdown loss to an unranked team that contenders like Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, all of those teams lost to unranked teams. 26 consecutive wins for Sark against non-top 15 teams. That's pretty good. That's a high floor. That is a remarkably high floor. First time playing in consecutive conference title games for Texas since never.
Gosh, never.
Now,
wow.
They didn't have a Big 12 championship from 2011 to 2016. Remember, conference championship games, a 90s creation in a lot of different ways. Thank you to the SEC and Spurrier for that and making them so much more popular. But Texas, during that stretch from 2011 to 2016, where they weren't having a Big 12 championship game, they still lost at least 4 conference games 5 times. And the one
they
year
were
that
not
they
making
didn't,
that.
Yeah, 2013, they wouldn't have made it anyway. So they didn't miss out on anything. Really nice regular season for Texas. If they can get healthy, they have to be part of that conversation, because that defense can stymie anyone. I truly believe that it can stymie anybody in college football, and it's not going to be a fun team to have to prep for.
Yeah, and I mean, I think at the end of the day, just going back to the scheduling point really quick, we talked about the time, scheduling Michigan, I think was a really big deal. And we always say you can't control your conference schedule. And so, hey, how about that win getting a little bit better on Saturday? A little bit of a holiday present. So, yeah, I mean, point being, I think Texas has, at this point, and I articulated that wrong, they beat Alabama last year, i.e., like, Texas has been through the ringer. They have really been impressive. It's the classic, like, we all got a buddy like that. Sometimes I've been known to be that buddy where it's like, where's this guy? We got 2 minutes. We're all going to the event. We're all got our suits on. Dude just bust through the door looking ready. That was Texas' last 20 years of football, because it was like, these guys are never going to get it together. And as soon as the test showed up, as soon as the event started, they're in the SEC. They got Steve Sarkisian. They got a Manning on their team. It's like, these people did it again. They somehow, none of that mattered, and they're just here now.
24-2 since the start of last season. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. 24-3. I take that back. They had the 2 losses last year. My bad. Lost to Oklahoma, and then obviously lost in the semifinal game to Kalen DeBoer and Washington, and then lost this year to Georgia. 24-3, I think that is. Is that right? No, 23-3. I'm doing math on the fly, people. Give me a break, all right? We're trying. We're doing the best we
our
can.
school.
For A&M.
Real quick on A&M. Oh,
Yeah.
boom, go ahead.
Yeah, I still think it's awesome to host that game. You know, and I still think that means a lot. You got Dude Perfect swearing on College Game Day. No, I'm just kidding. I'm watching Dude Perfect videos for 13 years, I think.
I was going to say, you feel like the target demo for some Dude Perfect, especially young Connor. Did you try some trick shots?
I did not. But I actually feel like I'm not supposed to be in the target demo. At least
Okay.
now that I have Claire, although she's not old enough to sit here and like watch YouTube and trick shot videos and be their target demo. I don't have like an 8-year-old kid at home who idolizes them. I am kind of not their target demo in a lot of ways, but I've been watching Dude Perfect videos forever. And in all seriousness, like cool for those guys. Great to be able to have that moment at College Game Day, and great for A&M to be able to book in the regular season hosting College Game Day. Now, the frustrating thing, obviously, is you lose both of those games. You lose to Notre Dame, and you lose the all-important one to Texas. But I do think that was the biggest game at Kyle Field since joining the SEC. I think it's even bigger than Johnny Manziel hosting Bama because of the timing of it, because of the 13 years of not playing Texas. But I think that you still have to look at that. You still have to understand that context as it relates to another 8-4 season, because people will make their 8-4 jokes. They will. And people, especially in Burnt Orange, will point out that Texas took exactly 1 year to get into the SEC championship, and A&M has been in the conference for 13 years, and they still have not been able to do that. Okay, that all is what it is. But it still was a game that felt really, really important. And A&M beat a pair of top 10 teams at the time to be able to get there. And I think there was only 4 FBS teams that did that, Georgia Tech being one of those teams as well, which we will get to Georgia Tech in just a second here. But you know think about this, though. If you had just told any A&M fan coming into the year that Mike Elko would do this year one, you would have a chance to be in these conversations late in the season, you would have taken that, and you would have felt like you are building something and going in the right direction. And that's the good thing, okay? You still feel like you have a quarterback to be able to build around. How many times has that been a question in College Station of quarterback battle? What are they going to do post Kellen Mond? Like just trying to figure out what that looks like. But I will say this, and I'm not trying to do a victory lap. I'm not, okay? I like Marcel Reed's growth. I think Marcel Reed's going to be a good player in this league. I was waiting on Fowler and Herbstreit to acknowledge how certain they were about Marcel Reed during that LSU game. Because listen back to that and how confident they were. You got to trust this guy. This guy gives your offense a totally new ceiling, and he was brilliant that night. And they were talking about him like he was about to lead A&M to an SEC championship, okay? And I'm not just going to sit here and blame him for the loss just because they were held scoreless, okay? That's not what I'm doing, and I'm not trying to just dog Marcel Reed. But I said after that game, let's see what it looks like when teams actually have a full week to prepare for him. That was the point that I tried to hammer home that night. Lost all 3 SEC games after that, and they averaged 4.94 yards per play.
And mind you, there was a game that he completed 2 passes. I said that at the time. It's like, hey, you
Against
smoked
LSU.
LSU. Yeah, you smoked LSU in that game. Nope, but you gotta have more than that. And he grew a little bit. The Auburn game was a good performance, yes. I think. But yeah.
Love that he has come back in some of these games. He doesn't really feel like he's out of it. He's not really like a big body language going to take you out of the game type guy or anything like that. And I think the Le'Veon Moss injury really hurt. That injury early in the South Carolina game was brutal. They really needed him with the backfield depth. Great to see Reuben Owens back after it looked like he had suffered a season-ending injury. So I'm not trying to dismiss that or anything. But sometimes we just get so excited with these small sample sizes when they happen in prime time like that. And it's worth keeping things in perspective. I am excited for a full offseason of Marcel Reed with Colin Klein. I hope he gets some new weapons added in the portal. I am excited to see Arch and Marcel Reed battle in Austin next year. I'm already looking forward to that. Good things are ahead, but just remember, keep things in perspective when you see performances like that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, man, I'll make it this simple. Like, I think as a Texas A&M fan, you're going to be completely thrilled about this year, right? And I'll tell you why. I think, and we're like, as long as I am here, we will be having this conversation. So get used to it. this expanded playoff is going to create a ton of conversations that honestly, in my opinion, shouldn't be when it comes to expectations. For Texas A&M, they are so far ahead of expectation, and they have been since, almost week 1 or 2, to be honest, playing as well as they did against Notre Dame.
Week
You saw it
3,
there a
I
little
think
bit.
I think the Florida game was when that reality kind of, because it's one thing to lose to Notre Dame, but I don't think anybody was after that. We certainly go listen back to that pod. I don't think after that game we were saying, oh, A&M part of the 12-team playoff conversation. I think it was, oh boy, this offense is going to take a long time, and then what they did at Florida kind of changed that.
Right, but I'm saying from where they came from. Coming from Jimbo Fisher paying billions of dollars to win 5 games, and it probably felt like such a treadmill and so hopeless. And it's like, how? It doesn't matter what we do. We could spend all this money. We could bring in the coaches. We could bring in the quarterback. Doesn't matter. And you start off and you have a competent football team that's fun to watch. And so, like, that's my point there is you're in year 1. This is the SEC. You know what I'm saying? Things could have gone so south for you at Texas A&M with 2 former Big 12 teams coming in. Where are you in the pecking order? What A&M did here is I'd say 10 out of 10, 12 out of 10 as far as expectations. The fact they're in the SEC championship discussion last week of the season, year 1 under a new head coach. Doesn't matter they lost the game. Doesn't matter they got blown out by South Carolina. They competed in the SEC. This team is only going to get more talented. They lost a ton of guys to the portal. Colin Klein, he's the real deal. Mike Elko, he's the real deal. I think we've seen enough out of those guys because it's about adapt or die. And within season, this team showed they could do that. So I'm very bullish on Texas A&M.
I agree. I think it'll be a fascinating team to discuss in the offseason. Very interested in those portal moves and also interested what Colin Klein's future looks like. If he's going to get head coaching opportunities after the way that they were able to kind of adjust their offense on the fly this year, Wigman and Marcel Reed, different type of players, but not a failed season by any stretch of the imagination, as excruciating as that probably felt to lose that game to Texas on Saturday night. All right. Clean old fashioned hate, Will. Question. How many overtimes is too many overtimes? Because I think 8 was too many.
As someone who I remember the amount of sweat I was covered in after that LSU Texas A&M game, I guess it's better to have them go quicker. I miss the old overtime, man.
It's better to be covered in sweat than covered in Powerade like Coach O was that night. Sticky.
Sure is.
Very, very sticky.
He was so sticky for so long. That was, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I think I like the old way. Good.
That's the reason we have this new overtime system. I mean, that is why that was the case in Illinois and Penn State, of course, playing that 9 overtime game, which I remember watching a couple of years ago. 8 overtimes Georgia needed to clinch a playoff spot, and that according to Joe Tess, who reminded you that Georgia was indeed about to clinch a playoff spot, even though he doesn't have the authority to hand out playoff spots. I agree with him for what it's worth. It was weird how much that was pushed in such a definitive way. In the first year of this new 12-team playoff, I hope and think the selection committee will not penalize a team for playing in a conference championship game and reward an idle team. But pretending you know exactly what the selection committee will do is the false confidence I can
do the devil's advocate thing here. Like, this is the first time in my life I'm like, dang, Danny Cannell might have a point about some of this stuff. Watching that game, it was like that game felt like Tony Soprano was pulling levers while I was watching that game.
I think I kind of agree with you. That and seeing the SEC on CBS logo, I know Georgia Tech fans watching that game, that didn't sit particularly well. And this game was a mess. This game was a mess. Will, you were celebrating your mom's birthday and turned this on when it was, I think, 20-6 in the middle of the fourth quarter, right?
We were about to go out in New Orleans, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, exactly. I was like, I'll watch Georgia lose really quick, and I only watched them come back. It was awesome. We ended up sitting in front of the television for 45 minutes. Bless my girlfriend, Andrea, because she was locked in with me. By the time we were done, I was full of yummy food. I had a couple of drinks while I was sitting there, really went out to a couple bars. It was funny. I was walking. I was like, I can't watch anymore of this. We got in the Uber. I'm sitting there at the bar, and people were like crowding around me watching. I'm like, this is ridiculous, Georgia. Let me get on with my night. Somebody score. It was a great time, though.
Oh gosh, that's awesome. That's kind of a throwback experience of one person showing that like one person's got a little tiny TV or something like that. Everybody's crouched around. What's going on? I'm sure for a lot of Georgia fans, it was that type of experience. Can you imagine being a Georgia fan and leaving that game in the middle of the fourth quarter when Georgia Tech went up by 2 touchdowns? Just I don't know that you're covered in sweat with how chilly they said it was, 40 degrees. The northern crowd didn't seem to take too kindly to that. The fact that it could possibly be considered chilly when it was 40 degrees. Chilly. That's all I said. I'll give Joe Tess a break for saying chilly. That's fine. But yeah, you missed an entire game if you left in the middle of the fourth quarter. maybe that game was just pure torture for Georgia fans to endure. And maybe there are fans who, yes, while the comeback happened, they actually look back and go, you know what? That's fine. I missed the 8 overtimes. I didn't have to go through that. Shout out my guy Perry, by the way. Tailgated 15 hours on a torn ACL. He had meniscus surgery. Gritty performance by Perry.
With his cane.
Yeah. He's got his cane. Tore his ACL while tailgating. That's if that's not, it might mean too much, man. No, Perry does it like nobody else. But can you imagine watching that game with a rooting interest? Because even if you were watching without a rooting interest, I was checking my heart rate, sweating bullets, watching this. The intensity that game felt like it was being played with, even though you could actually argue that this game wasn't as significant because Georgia still obviously had a path to the playoff if it lost. And I kind of hated that. A little bit here. You know what else I hated besides how poorly this game was officiated? A lot of missed calls. Oh my God. The holding call, Georgia fans maybe got away with one there. Some of the pass interference stuff that Kirby wanted to be called. Some bad calls in this game.
Yeah. I think it was an ACC crew too, wasn't it?
I don't think it was. I don't think they just do if it's non-conference, they usually do not do one conference for that obvious reason. I could be wrong on that one for this, but whoever it was, not ideal. Not going to be great to look back on that one. But I hated that Haynes King had to lose that game. You know, that dude played his face off.
That's one of those, like, it happens to be at NCAA, and I'm like, this isn't real. Like, where it's like, how did you? They did the reverse Miami, didn't they? Yeah,
great play by Dan Jackson. You should, and not. I mean, I guess not reverse Miami because they weren't in position to be kneeling. You shouldn't have been kneeling in that situation because Georgia still had the timeouts. But that didn't feel like a fair ending for that guy. I think I'm finally ready to sell high on my Haynes King stock. This is the time. Yep. I held it for 5 years. It's finally time to sell. Haynes King with a bad shoulder left it all out there. We joked in the preview pod. Is he going to play more than 5.5 passing snaps? Are they going to put Philo in? Are they going to run this 2 quarterback system that they've been running? I don't know why they didn't opt to run Haynes King in overtime. Advantage Georgia for doing that. Not sure why also Brent Key didn't go for 2 in that first overtime. Could have saved us all a ton of time. Yep. And honestly, probably should have run the ball there. And maybe the Jamal Haynes injury, he got hurt on that passing play. Maybe that impacted it. But you know what else could have saved us a lot of time and a lot of energy? If Kirby had just kicked the extra point instead of going for 2. Kirby, what are you doing? 17-6. What analytics said to go for 2? Nobody could figure that out. Nobody. Just kick the extra point.
Kirby's like an old school sicko. I can really appreciate that because there's so few of those left. But he was kind of in the Saban silo for so long that even though he's younger, he's kind of like that older. He's like, I got some math. I got some documents here. Hold on. Almost like Les Miles-esque in a way, but it works. It's like early Les Miles.
That did not work. I hated that. that happened because if he had just kicked the extra point, obviously that overtime would have never happened. But
I'm saying he wins the games he does the stuff in, so it's like, true. Is he secretly a genius? Because Kirby really has some of that kind of like extra math we don't see going on, so I could say it.
Yeah. This game was not fun for Georgia fans. As great as that comeback was, and as resilient as that team looked, I think you can look at this and feel like this is kind of a microcosm for this season. And man, if you just leave that door open for Georgia at all, maybe they're going to be able to take advantage of this. But Georgia fans, be honest with me, okay? If that result had held, Georgia Tech up 17-0 at halftime, looking like it was on its way to pulling off another one of these Brent Key type upsets. If Georgia Tech had just smoked the Dogs, you would have felt bad about still having a playoff path in Atlanta. You would have, okay? And I'm not saying apologize for anything. You had to endure the SEC. I get all that. And 9-3. With a loss at home, a blowout loss at home to Georgia Tech to end the regular season, you would have felt bad about still having a path to the playoff. That result didn't hold. We don't have to necessarily sit here and debate the merits of that. Georgia deserves a lot of credit for coming back in this game and not turning this into another Ole Miss performance. That's all well and good. But if this had been a 9-3 Georgia team with 2 blowout losses to non-playoff teams and that team having a path to the national championship, that would have made the BCS roll over in its grave. It just would have.
Yeah.
Georgia avoids that, though. That's the good news.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, right? I mean, like in rivalry week, right? There were some matchups you talked about Syracuse, Miami, where it's like some of these teams geographically, whatever. And we get in the middle of this, we got your Georgia Techs and Georgias, and you're like FSU, Floridas, and you still have this old school kind of chaos, kind of like what I was talking about. And some of you wants to say, so, any given Saturday, sometimes these games have a magical feel to them, but this did feel a little bit like, I don't know, schematic. This is one of those games that if we had more time, I could talk about it for an hour, but I don't want to really even get it because there's just so many things that happen weird for Georgia. I think that should be happy you won. I think at the end of the day,
the first play was weird for Georgia when that happened, and the guy rolls out of the tackle. It looks like Michael Williams has him stopped up, and then it turns into like a 45-yard run. That very first play, it was that kind of night.
And like some of it you can say, but then on the other side, everything kind of corrects. So you could say, yeah, statistically that never happens against Georgia, but at the same time, the Hayden's King fumble. So like ball don't lie in a way. It's almost like none of it matters at the end of the day. Like, basically what it turns into is Sark riding a hot hand on one end of the SEC championship game. Kirby Smart, furious at his defense, winning something by the hair of his chin, as you would say. The matchup we could all root for, because at the end of the day, we could talk about officiating. We talk about, how the offense played. We could do the Bobo thing, but it's just not worth it because they ended up winning the game. They're in the playoff. They're in the SEC championship game. And I think that Kirby would almost rather have it that way, where it's like, you guys look so sorry for 60 minutes against an inferior opponent in a way that we haven't seen since like a South Carolina game or something. Like when it comes to like really a Georgia, like, we completely nailed that Georgia Tech preview where they are so physical. They are so hard to defend. So, again, you probably can just throw that out. Just to be honest with you, in terms of things that really matter, you're going to see a whole new OC in Texas or Sarkisian, a very physical team. So maybe that's part of it that you – but, again, Kirby Smart almost losing that game. Practice is going to – I wish I had front row seats to practice for the next couple weeks.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think that – even if Georgia wins that game against Texas and beats Texas twice, which would certainly be really impressive, I think we should still be looking at Georgia as a wild card instead of a dominant force, top two favorite to win a title going into the playoff. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have championship upside, but I just think what we have seen from them so far throughout this regular season suggests quarter to quarter, week to week, yeah, we don't really set our watch to Georgia and the way that we have in the past. And
I mean, it's must-watch television.
It is. It absolutely is, man. It's maybe it's a good thing that Georgia is not going to be facing anything but top 12 teams for the rest of the season, and maybe that's going to bring out the absolute best in them. Although it didn't in that game against Ole Miss, and obviously the slow start against Bama clearly plagued them there. But this is just a very inconsistent team. It's an inconsistent team that still has an opportunity to do everything. And if you're forgetting about what's at stake in this SEC championship, a lot on the line for Georgia, even though, again, clinch playoff berth. So Joe Tess says that. Shout out to Claire in the background. She disagrees with Joe Tess's opinion. We know what's at stake with a win. Okay. First round bye.
The socks in the Saban household for Christmas.
Do you think Saban texts Sark and Kirby on the same group text when they're both going to be playing an SEC championship, or is that an individual text?
I think it's by standing.
Okay.
I think he's Sark got it all worked out. First.
Yeah.
He goes, okay, well, Sark, you're ahead. Hey.
But Georgia beat him, so, I mean,
head to head. He's a head-to-head respecter. We know that about Nick.
This is true. Yeah, very much. But yeah, with a loss, Georgia maybe going to have to travel for a first-round playoff game instead of playing at home. We'll see what that looks like. Tuesday's ranking is so important for a lot of this stuff. But if they get a home playoff game, and it's like, maybe they still will and get one of those top 8 seeds, 5 through 8, even with a loss that's still on the table, obviously, against Texas. In case you haven't heard, Georgia would be playing at a place where it hasn't lost in 30 games, now 31 games. They wanted to remind you of that every 5 minutes on the podcast.
It's our ratings now, yeah.
Why do they not bring up the fact that Georgia has not lost a home game at night since 2009? Why didn't they bring that up? Why? At any point, hey, by the way, Georgia hasn't lost a home game at night in 15 years. How hard is that? That streak is a decade longer than the one that you keep bashing us over the head with. I didn't
Weird
like
game presentation.
Weird game presentation. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. We don't need to talk about that longer than the game actually lasted, but a wild Friday night it was in Athens. Let's talk about the wild Saturday that we had in Death Valley, the other Death Valley. LaNorris Sellers. Clemson.
And the F is for.
Yep. The F is for fun, kids. It is. LaNorris Sellers beats Clemson. I don't want to say single-handedly, but how many times do you think South Carolina fans have watched that game-winning touchdown by now? By the time that people are listening to this, 30 times, 40 times, maybe 10 more after they pause this podcast and go watch it on repeat.
He had such a nice little TikTok size highlight out of that one. You could fit the Seller stuff in about a 45, a type 45, where it's just cut. This is a really fun performance out of him.
That play was unreal, man. 3rd and 16 in that spot. That's the thing that's going to get lost in the shuffle because he had some really impressive runs, but the fact that it was 3rd and 16 and he basically had the entire defense chasing him and all of them missed on this 20-yard touchdown run that was one of the biggest plays that we've seen from South Carolina in a long, long time. Maybe the single biggest play of the post-Spurrier era. You could definitely make that case. Just a handful of guys in all of college football, I think, that could have made that play in that spot. Maybe even just a handful of players. Let's include running backs in that. I mean, that was unreal how difficult he was to bring down in that game. Shane Beamer beats Clemson in Death Valley again. First coach to winning consecutive trips to Clemson since Spurrier did so 2010, 2012. We talked about it in the preview. First time that South Carolina came back from 7 or more entering the fourth quarter since 2017. I saw that in SEC final. I was like, how is that possible? They just don't have comeback wins. But that's maybe because South Carolina's been a vibes team. And vibes teams don't typically pull off comebacks like that.
They have some beatdowns in there. That's the thing. Their upsets are not like last second.
Yeah,
2 points. It's like, you guys want to head for the exits? We're up 30 at this one.
Yeah, the Tennessee game, of course. I mean, beating Auburn like it did.
A&M game.
A&M game. Yeah, Florida last year in the Mullen era. That was a huge thing for him as well. But I'm putting the Vibes team association to rest because South Carolina has shown it is no longer a Vibes team. 6 in a row to end the regular season. 4 of those wins came against ranked teams. They would have knocked playoff conversations off the table for Clemson again, if not for Kyle McCord putting on his cape and showing Ohio State fans that, yes, it can get worse for you on rivalry week Saturday. South Carolina's a big boy program with a real quarterback and a real defense who didn't even need Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard to be game wreckers. That's the impressive thing about that performance. Like they were mostly held in check throughout that whole game. I don't think they had a single TFL in that one. I think they had what did South Carolina have, 2 or 3 TFLs in that entire game? I mean, think about that. They got here. I'm pulling it up right now. And Demetrius Knight was brilliant, by the way. He was incredible. Yeah, 3 TFLs in this game, and neither of which came from their 2 studs. This defense, I know that we talk so much about Kennard and we talk a lot about Dylan Stewart, and he will get a ton of love this offseason coming back. But what that group continued to do against a Clemson offense that everybody was praising and saying they've turned the corner, look at all these things that they've done, albeit against much lesser competition, that defense absolutely balled. Well, I don't know that South Carolina's playoff bound. I'm not going to make the case that they absolutely deserve to be playoff bound. I love how they looked when LaNorris Sellers has been healthy. I don't love that they have the 3 losses, and 2 of them are 2 fellow 3-loss teams, one of which being the Ole Miss blowout in Columbia. You get it.
I love 2 of the losses. I just don't love the other one.
Yeah, if it's a touchdown game against Ole Miss, we're having a different conversation. That Tuesday ranking is going to be everything. Does the selection committee move them past Bama and Ole Miss? That's going to be the question. South Carolina will probably, if we want to fast forward this to Selection Sunday, South Carolina is probably going to have 3 wins against the final CFP top 25 if A&M stays in the top 25, because they would also have Mizzou and then Clemson. So the resume is still going to look really solid, even if some of those wins didn't age as well as they could have hoped for. But I kind of love how Beamer's viewed the playoff conversation. And maybe you'll disagree with this, but he seems pretty self-aware about this. He was even self-aware enough to publicly root for the Syracuse upset of Miami and gets his wish granted in that one. Better approach than Dabo, who said beforehand that his team can play with anyone in the country. They definitely played with South Carolina. I'll give them that. But Clemson went 0-3 in 3 games against FBS teams that won at least 8 games. And they were outscored by 42 points in those games. To play with anyone in the country means not that. Not that. That's That's not what I would call.
Yeah, if you're favored, if you're like the higher ranked team, you don't want to quote unquote play with anyone in the country. That's the deal. It was a prophecy.
Yeah, none of those games on the road, by the way. You had 2 games at home. You got blown out at home against Louisville, and then obviously the neutral site game against Georgia. Clemson fans would say that's basically a de facto Georgia game. They would probably also fail to mention that Kirby Smart hasn't been as good as people realize at Mercedes-Benz. We don't need to get into that. You know who Clemson just I got a feeling they're going to just have nightmares about this entire 8-month off season. And then when the regular season starts again and they're looking at the end of the season and realizing that they have another date with this guy. Let's talk about LaNorris Sellers again. Can we? Because Rex Beck's your boy.
Don't talk about the transfer portal. Haunting them in their sleep. Ooh.
You know, not a transfer portal guy, LaNorris Sellers. And for all the Clemson fans who were hoping to be able to win and get into the playoff and talk about you don't need the portal to do that. There are still Clemson fans who very much support that Dabo mantra, and they still could because obviously they're in the ACC championship and they can still do that. But LaNorris Sellers being a non-portal quarterback who just popped like this is pretty remarkable with the lack of hype that he had in the preseason because he wasn't one of these portal guys. He wasn't as decorated as a recruit as some of these others. But the stat that tells the entire story of his performance, and this is via Mac Chadwick over at PFF. Sellers had 18. He forced 18 missed tackles in this game. 17 of them were on the final play. No, it felt like it. Ashton Genty is the only player to have more in a game all year. Sellers forced the most.
Bro.
He forced the most missed tackles of a quarterback since PFF became a thing a decade ago, 2014. And he finished with 171 rushing yards, 176 after contact. He's so special. He just is. He's so special that Beamer afterwards said, this guy needs to be in the Heisman conversation. I won't quite go that far. LaNorris Sellers, an all-SEC quarterback? I think so. I think so. Milroe's going to probably end up getting it. But maybe the Jackson Dart, LaNorris Sellers head-to-head or something like that. Maybe that's But South Carolina, remember, has not had an all-SEC quarterback since joining the SEC.
Yep.
LaNorris Sellers could be that guy. He has put himself very much in position to do that. I would bang the drum for him. I really would.
You know what's funny too? We talked about that with respect to Rattler when he was over there. And it was really like whenever he got there, it was kind of like, it's really not that hard to be like the greatest South Carolina quarterback of all time. And I mean, just because it's kind of been everything else. They've had great, receivers, tight ends, running backs, whatever. But, like Garcia was not like a 4-year starter or anything. They've kind of put that together. And it is, to your point, like I think it's a really big deal. They have a homegrown guy. You talked about guys that could make that play, like the way that they got Rocket. I know I've talked about like Nick Harbor and how much I love him, even as a decoy.
Leading receiver in this game, by the way, Nick Harbor was really coming on well.
Yeah, that's a guy that I'll never get tired of talking about him because, and maybe it is with this offense, like maybe it just is very complicated and it has taken a long time to get everybody involved because there are so many moving pieces to this offense. But when it works, the way it did against Texas A&M. And the point that I was making about Clemson with the transfer portal is more about like adapt or die. You know what I'm saying? Like Dabo hates modernization. He hates the NIL. He hates new stuff. And when you see, oh gosh, I really got to credit. Dowell Loggins, I think I'm just wrong about him.
I was going to ask you, Will. I was going to ask you.
And look, this is not exactly the game to do that because LaNorris Sellers really did put the team on his back here. But that's why I make the point about the Texas A&M game. Is that this is kind of the vibes team too going into next year because you think about getting that guy back, another year in the offense.
Stewart's coming back too. It's going to be two of the most high-profile players in the not just in the SEC, but in the sport.
It's kind of like who got it better than us at Columbia, South Carolina. And when you look at their schedule, man, this is the last point I got on them. Like, if you look at their schedule, I could not be more impressed. This is similar to almost like what Florida had to go through. If you look at even starting the year at Kentucky in a game they won easily, LSU, ranked team, Ole Miss, ranked good team, at Alabama. Oklahoma obviously was struggling, but they handled business there. Texas A&M blew them out, top 10 team. Vandy, at Vandy,
it's a tough
Alabama
schedule.
struggled with them. They didn't. Mizzou, ranked team. Clemson, at Clemson, ranked. Like their whole schedule has been a gauntlet. This is actually one of the hardest schedules. I think it has aged gracefully because of Vandy and stuff like that. So the fact that it's your talent versus the teams you play, like we knew South Carolina didn't exactly have Georgia or Alabama talent. So the fact that they played with Alabama, LSU, the fact that they kept these games close, I just couldn't be more impressed with Beamer and that team, man.
Okay, since I'm going to take that as an apology to Dow Loggins.
I'm apologizing. I owe him an apology. I was not familiar with his game.
So I will give developer of quarterbacks scheme. Still a little bit TBD, but developer of quarterbacks, Dow Loggins checks that box with flying colors with what LaNorris Sellers has done this year, what Rattler did last year, post Marcus Satterfield. What's Marcus Satterfield up to? The apology that I need to make is to you. I'm going to give people a little peel behind the onion here. After the Alabama game that South Carolina lost, the last South Carolina loss, by the way, in case you forgot, a game in which South Carolina rallies all the way back. I told you afterwards, man, you went on too long about South Carolina. They're 3-3. We can't do like 10 minutes on a team that's not really going anywhere. Yeah, like maybe they're frisky, they're fun. We didn't have time to talk about South Carolina in circles in that spot. And I kind of let you, like, I try and not be that guy who's going to be critical of what you say on these airwaves. If I feel something in that moment, I'll push back. And I didn't feel like you were necessarily hammering home a point that they were all of a sudden going to be this elite team. And it felt like you were patting them on the back for a job well done and a loss. Well, I need to apologize to you because they're 9-3 now. And I'll talk in circles all you want about South Carolina and about what this team has built, because you're right. That day was kind of a turning point with how they rallied. And to think about this team being that close and being in these playoff conversations, I could not have fathomed that in mid-October.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the losses in the SEC expanding is I wish I would have seen them against other teams, because with the schedule they played, man, again, not moral victories here, but Alabama, LSU, a game against LSU, they had feelings about the call. Game against Alabama, you had a 2-point conversion at the end of the game. This team bought in for Beamer, and the fact that he's been able to get those guys like Stewart, the fact that he's been able to get those guys like Nick Harbor, the fact that the transfer portal additions, we talked about it, passing on KJ Jefferson, getting Rocket Sanders, everybody's laughing at them going, why are you getting Rocket Sanders? You could have KJ Jefferson. Ask A&M about that. So hats off to Beamer. I think he should get some real Coach of the Year award and a really, really Coach of the Year love in a really hard SEC. They're one of the best teams. I think they're a top 3 team.
I think Shane Beamer's the SEC Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
I think he's got it. Clark Lee could get it at 6-6, and I wouldn't push back on that necessarily. I thought Elko, if he led A&M to an SEC championship berth, I think that would have been. I don't think Billy's going to win it for 7-5, no. But I think Beamer getting South Carolina to 9-3, I think he's going to end up winning it, or at least he's going to win a share of that award this year. All right, Tennessee, Vandy. Will, when Junior Sherrill took the opening kickoff back to the house, and then Dylan Sampson loses the fumble on Tennessee's first possession, I thought Vandy's about to do this again. Speaking of vibes teams, I bet so many people in that building thought this is about to happen. Vandy is about to cause chaos. Tennessee, all you had to do was beat Vandy and you're going to ruin your playoff chances. What a terrible, disastrous, horrible start for the Vols. Lesser teams would have fallen in that mid-construction stadium. Alabama, looking at you. Tennessee did not. Nico was phenomenal. Maybe my favorite game that Nico's played against actual competition. I thought you see Dylan Sampson shake off that early fumble. Didn't score a touchdown for the first time all year. Got banged up at the end. Hopefully 3 weeks of rest. He'll be good to go. Did break the Tennessee single season rushing record. Dylan Sampson continues to just hammer away and be a rock. But yeah, the lost fumble, not great. Really important game though for Nico for a variety of reasons. He lost his safety valve before this game. Brew McCoy, man, just can't stay healthy. Pre-game injury without him. He's unavailable. Down 14-0 in a playoff or bust game. Nico is going to have to make some big-time plays, and he finds Dante Thornton for 2 long scores. Dante Thornton would also later leave this game, too. He looked like he was well on his way to having a Randy Moss Thanksgiving game, and then he gets sidelined in this one. But I just thought the way that he hit him in stride felt like what we saw against Oklahoma and what we were seeing in some of those early season matchups that made us gush about Nico and this potential. And it doesn't mean that he's going to get back to that against every team that Tennessee faces moving forward, but it was a really encouraging sign to see that velocity, to see that confidence. And this is not a quarterback who's broken by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think that if you're Tennessee, you can expect to win multiple playoff games with anything short of the best version of Nico. You might be able to win one, and if Tennessee gets a home playoff game, yeah, you could probably win. You're good enough in all those other areas to win with a C+ Nico game, probably. But to win multiple playoff games, you need that guy. You need that guy. You're not getting to the Final Four without that dude slinging it and just taking advantage of some of these matchups that they felt like they had and they were able to capitalize on. And look, Tennessee, that defense just continues to do its part. Scoreboard really wasn't a good indicator of their early performance because the opening kickoff touchdown, the short field off the Sampson fumble, but that group was not discouraged at all. They made Diego Pavia into the worst version of himself. That Jamad McCoy interception in the end zone was absurd. Absolutely absurd. That guy is 19 and doing stuff like that. The Oregon State transfer has been a revelation. I can't say enough great things about him. I think he should be a preseason All-American, going into next year. He's going to be on all these way too early mock drafts when those come out in April for 2026. But yeah, Tennessee fell behind 14-0 and scored 36 of the next 39 points. That is how you clinch a playoff berth and not pull a Miami. Yeah. Tennessee's in.
Yeah. I think, we talked about rivalry week magic.
It's tough to say. It's tough to say. I struggle with that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So the magic involved in this certain week, right? Immediately, that's what this was, right? Vandy, to your point, got up to the hot start. Credit to Tennessee. I think, we talked about in the preview pod, I think this matchup really benefited Tennessee because of, the physicality. It's funny when a guy like Dylan Sampson fumbles, you go, okay, what's the story of this game? How many times is Dylan Sampson going to fumble? We'll get to the Iron Bowl later. It's like, you got to really capitalize off those points, and you got to really, belong once you get on the scoreboard. And, credit to Tennessee for locking in that they are playing like it's all about sturdiness in this year. It's all about what does your bad look like. And I think Tennessee was able to, and, a team that has been among the most inconsistent among the good teams, in these games where you're just like, what? This is an offensive team. This is Josh Heupel. This guy is a Leach quarterback. What is he doing out here? Unable to put together a couple passes. So it's great to see Nico. It's great to see, Dylan Sampson get back on the board and still have a pretty nice day at the office, or a really nice day at the office. If my running back got 180 yards, I wouldn't care if he fumbled. And so point being, it's a rivalry week game that you escaped. Your future is all ahead of you. And I think this means a lot, exactly what you said, that Nico was able to simulate, to create, to live in real desperation and call his team out of it. I think it was a perfect result for them.
Was intense. Didn't see, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between Tennessee and Ole Miss, but you didn't see Nico turtle like you've seen Jackson Dart turtle in some of those games. And that could have been an easy opportunity for him to just go into a shell. And this ends up being a devastating Tennessee loss. And instead, they're going to be playing in the playoff, perhaps very likely hosting a playoff game. Remember, those are seeds 5 through 8. Tennessee obviously came in at number 8 going into rivalry week. But also remember that a team outside of the top 12 could win a conference title, become one of the highest ranked conference champs, and slide past the Vols. And then maybe if they're at 9, how that could all work out, it's not necessarily set in stone. But Tennessee should feel really good about where it's at. In my opinion, everything moving forward for Tennessee should be gravy. It really, it would be an awesome visual to have a home game at Neyland. And let's not forget, we like the Vols weapons coming into this season. And we were big Dylan Sampson guys, all bang the drum team. Did not think he'd be this good. He's been awesome. But this was a team that was ranked 108th in the country in percentage of returning production, the Bill Connolly stat that I always talk about. Well, nobody outside of the top 100 is anywhere close to a playoff spot. No, go back and look at those final rankings when those came out. I think they came out in April, I want to say. Maybe it was the summer. But Tennessee is on an island compared to all these other teams that are competing. Michigan was a bottom 5 team in that, but certainly a team that obviously has had a significant drop-off outside of the Ohio State game. But think about that. To have that happen on the same day that Heupel's UCF successor, Gus Malzahn, resigned to become the OC at Florida State, it felt ironic that Tennessee clinched this playoff berth and did so with a guy that they believe in. And this is what you hope for year 4 of the Heupel era.
Man, I can't take that bait either, because that's a whole other funny little story that's going on. But yeah, I'm right there with you, man. This Josh Heupel thing, what a long, strange trip it's been, right? He's gotten Tennessee kind of on the precipice. I think that, we've kind of at times known what he was. vertical offense guy, a guy that starts early, a guy that's good at scripted plays, and he falls apart in the second half. Now their offense can't score in the first quarter. They only get better as the game goes on. Now they have disaster in the first quarter, and they are just they get, as Dylan Sampson, as they cover him, and it's like he gets harder to tackle as the game goes on. He just gets 1% larger with every carry. So I mean, they're just they're going to be a hard team to beat. Nico just needs to accept his role in this whole thing, and we've seen that he can do it at times.
They got to get healthy. Got to get healthy. I think that's really important for them during this 3-week layoff. All right, Iron Bowl. Bama avoids total disaster, gets up off the mat after last week. No comeback for Peyton Thorne. I guess it would have been a payback. That would after Gravedigger last year. A payback is what we would have called a Peyton Thorne comeback. Yeah, I'll be here all week. Bama didn't necessarily need a play like that to be able to come back and win this game. They were in control throughout most of it, at least. But when it was a 2-touchdown game in the middle of the fourth quarter and things are kind of getting interesting, Auburn's got the ball. Hugh Freeze thought that the best way to use Jarquez Hunter was to have him throw the football. Spoiler alert, it did not go well. It didn't go well. Saw the quote afterwards from Justin Hokanson, friend of the program. Freeze said that Hunter should have thrown the ball back to Peyton Thorne instead of taking a shot downfield, and they obviously didn't coach Hunter well enough. I went back and I watched the play, and Hugh Freeze is 100% incorrect. That would have been a pick six instead of just an arm punt if Jarquez Hunter had thrown the ball back to Peyton Thorne as they had tried to coach him to do. You know what? What are we doing? What are we doing?
Are you joking? You're telling me this team got 3 takeaways. Like I said, scored 0 touchdowns.
They had 4 takeaways, Will. They got 4 takeaways
in the first half. I'm talking about the first half. They scored 0 touchdowns. They had 3 takeaways in the first half. They scored 0 touchdowns. And this dude's sitting there going, well, here's the problem. Didn't utilize Peyton Thorne as a receiver.
Yeah, you know, we drew up the perfect trick play, man. Perfect trick play. Should have worked. Hugh Freeze failed Jarquez Hunter. As a player, as a person, that guy's playing in his last game in an Auburn uniform. He stayed at your program when everybody had a one-way street out. They're like, I don't want any part of this. The stench of the Brian Harsin era. I don't want to stick around. That dude stayed. And he could have left, and he could have played for a coach that actually gave a crap about the ground game. And instead, Hugh Freeze is trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And he's like, this is the offense that we're going to run, and we absolutely have to. Even when it's nut crunching time, you need to run the freaking football, and he doesn't give the ball to Jarquez Hunter.
Even when it's nut crunching time? I'm stealing that one. Like Auburn a nutcracker or like a...
Yeah. Oh, you never heard that before? That's a thing. That's a thing.
That's awesome. No, dude, you're right. I showed you that chart about EPA. Auburn's an unserious football team. Yeah, okay, they beat a cool first-year head coach. You should be so much farther along because you're so married to Peyton Thorne. The fact that this guy can't, say that. I'm just ready for this guy to graduate and see what Hugh Freeze can actually do. Lambert Smith with all them, you like some of the stuff they're starting to do this year, but it's still just, like I said, they're an unserious team. I never thought for a second they could win this game after halftime.
Well, I'm not done. I got more. I got to get this off my chest, man. Sorry. No, you're good. You're good. Hugh Freeze had this season as a play caller, and he wanted to take over the offense. Yeah. In 9 games against Core 4 competition that Auburn played this year, Jarquez Hunter got 13 or fewer carries 5 times, the majority of those games. And I know sometimes game flow is bad for a bad team. That doesn't suggest
it's never bad when you have Jarquez. He's a receiving back.
He could do a lot of things for you. He could do a lot of things. Nothing about this was game flow.
You had Montrell Johnson, I might understand it, because you can only kind of run up the middle. He gets better when you're in a passing off because he's untackleable. He's fast. He has great hits.
I hate this. This being the last game for Jarquez Hunter's time at Auburn is fitting for the Hugh Freeze era, but it's also just the most maddening thing ever because on 4th and 2 in a 14-3 game, Hugh Freeze is like, we're going to try and get him offsides. Nah, we're going to take this late game penalty. We're going to kick the field goal because we got stuffed the play before. And that means if we get stuffed one time, that means we can't run the football. Get a touchdown. You're competing for bowl eligibility in the Iron Bowl. You can have Bama in a really tough spot after just a disaster showing last week and have fans in Tuscaloosa going, oh boy, is this happening again? Are we about to have some weird things happen in the Iron Bowl? And instead, you decide that I need to call all these passing plays. 23 of the first 33 plays that were called for Auburn's offense were passes. Bama let up 257 rushing yards to a terrible Oklahoma offense last week.
Jackson Dart. Do you athletically?
Jackson Arnold, not Dart. But
You're right. The other Jackson, yeah. So athletically, we got Jarquez Hunter over here, Jackson Arnold over here. Who you taking 10 times?
I can't. That guy just deserves so much better. And I feel bad for Jarquez Hunter. So many guys, as you brought up before, so many guys on this team were due to deserve better guys. Keandre Lambert-Smith should be the first all-SEC receiver that Auburn's had in a decade. We talked about that with the Cam Coleman conversation coming into this and how that's been such a tough area. And Auburn really showed a lot of things down the stretch. And some might say, oh, well, you know what? That's why they were throwing the ball all over the place in this game. They want to take advantage of those matchups that they felt like they had on the outside. It's still Peyton Thorne throwing the football. Why? Jalen McLeod was awesome. Guys who aren't coming back were awesome for this team. And I should feel terrible for them that this is the way that it has to end. Auburn ends 5-7, fourth consecutive losing season. First time that's happened since 1946 to 1950. The Harry Truman administration. Who could forget Harry? I'm done talking about Auburn. I'm done.
Real quick, man. The fact that they threw the ball 41 times with Peyton Thorne and he only had one pick, that's a Christmas miracle. This could have gone so much worse for them. That's the thing. It's that, that's just a flawed design. I bless Peyton Thorne because it's not even his fault at this point. Moving on.
I'm counting the Jarquez Hunter pick as a Hugh Freeze pick.
Yeah, nobody threw that. That was operated by air. Yeah, against the Kane Womack defense, which pins its ears back. You got this quarterback sitting back there like a statue. Anyway, only one pick, though. So.
Only one pick. All right, Bama. Turned the ball over 4 times in this game, as we mentioned before. Yeah. Jalen Milroe, his legs still there.
Very much.
They exist. That's good. Jalen Milroe, fourth SEC quarterback to have 20 rushing touchdowns in a season. The other 3, pretty good. Guy by the name of Tim Tebow. Cam Newton, might have heard of him. Johnny Manziel, you've heard of him as well. That's good company. Very, very good company. Jalen Milroe played how you hoped he would, with the exception of turnovers. Kind of a microcosm of what he's been this year in a lot of ways.
Jalen Milroe experience played pretty well, minus the turnovers, which were head-scratching. Anyway.
Not great. But the Kane Womack defense was good. No Deontay Lawson. That group allowed 1 touchdown, and that was a really nice adjustment on the ball that Cam Coleman made for the only touchdown against this Bama defense. Do I think Bama's getting into the playoff? I don't have a rooting interest other than sanity. Sanity suggests to me, don't put this team in the playoff. They don't deserve it. And if you don't think that, or if you do think that Bama should be in the playoff, just go back to Norman. Tell me why Brent Venables ordered $94 worth of Taco Bell because he whooped that you-know-what. All right? Tell me why this Bama team that's lost 2 games to teams that are 6-6. Tell me why this team deserves to actually be in the playoff. Because, yes, the Georgia win was great. Georgia win was really impressive. All right? I'll give him credit for that. But there is no world in which Bama deserves to get into the playoff over someone like 2-loss SMU, who is currently 11-1 and would have to lose in the ACC championship game to make that happen. And I tweeted out a list of teams that I thought were already in, the 9 teams that I thought were already in. And you can go look that up yourself, shameless plug. And Matt Jones, shout out KSR, he pushed back on the SMU entry that I had. He said that he thinks the selection committee would still put in SMU over Bama if SMU loses to Clemson.
Sure.
Why? SMU is going to be no worse than 8. And that's not even putting them ahead of Ohio State necessarily. Okay. Is SMU, because they're going to move ahead of Miami. They definitely will. Mm-hmm. Is SMU really going to drop 4 spots so that an idle 3-loss Bama team who lost to 2 teams that are 6-6, is that team going to all of a sudden be granted a playoff spot and move into the conversation if SMU loses an extra game? Like, miss me with that. I would hate that. Okay. I would hate that for college football. Bama blew its opportunity and Bama knows it. Okay. It does. Bama fans, you know it too.
Starting with this year, I don't want to hear a single team upset, really. Maybe South Carolina, maybe hear them because they had a really hard road. But everybody else, you lost like 5 games, everybody. Like, who cares?
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Get in or go. I'm done with this.
If you get in, great.
BCS. Yeah. I don't want to hear this. Anyway.
The BCS would roll over in its grave again if Bama got in. Okay, I've banged the drum for Bama before. I'm not banging the drum for this Bama team. Okay, let's talk about the Snow Bowl that we had in Columbia, Arkansas and
So
Mizzou.
sick.
This was fun. They said that the SEC couldn't handle snow. Bet you didn't see them doing snow angels in this one. Some are saying that Mizzou should be the 3-loss team in the playoff, and it should host a playoff game. Look, if it could guarantee that it had snow for the first round playoff game, I'm on board.
Drake is going to say something this week, isn't he?
No, he's not.
He's going to say something this week, isn't it? There's another certain 3-loss SEC team that's not going to love right now.
I watched the post game. I watched the post game interview with Alyssa, who, by the way, talk about brutal draws to have as a sideline reporter. You think you're covering the SEC? They tell you that you got to be able to prepare for snow. And I was wondering if Alyssa was going to lead him in that direction, and he was going to open the door. And instead, he kept him in perspective. I think he's fully acknowledging the fact that the wins that Mizzou has had this year, it's not going to be playoff worthy, and obviously the losses, 2 of them being of the blowout variety. But snow games are so often overhyped going into that. And I can say that. Look, I'm repping the Bears right now. I've watched plenty of snow football. A certain, 2006 NFC Championship, or I guess that was 2006 season NFC Championship. Snow was coming down. I can't remember who the visiting team was.
You can't hurt me because I know that guy now. My boy Thomas Q. Jones. I'm only happy for his successes in life.
Sorry, that was me. That's all I got, Will. That's all I got. That was the best day of my life as a Bears fan, so let me have that. But because of like the way that snow usually falls, this is a meteorology class that you're getting right now. Usually by the time these games roll around, snow games aren't really happening. It's huge snow piles off to the side and not actually snow on the field. But because of how late it snowed in Columbia, we got a true kind of snow game, and it was fun to watch and not be there. Yeah, it was fun to watch for a game that otherwise would not have been that fun to watch. But Brady Cook runs right through the snow for the win. So happy for that guy that he got to go out that way and have that type of moment. Well, when we spoke with Brady Cook at SEC Media Days, I kind of developed a new appreciation for him. And while I didn't necessarily come away from that conversation repeating the Drink quote of wanting to have a daughter old enough to date him, I didn't go that route. But I definitely thought he just came across so personable and like such an easy guy to root for. And I kind of got it, why people really rally around him and why Drink just gushes about him at every possible turn. He's always going to get that play to know. And I'm sure he's going to have a frame picture of that running through the snow. That's your final big time moment in a Mizzou uniform. I'm assuming playing in the bowl game as well, but at Fro Field and getting that type of send off, it just kind of felt right. He'll get to be remembered exactly how he hoped to be remembered, as a winner. Won every game at home this year. Only home loss that Mizzou's had the last 2 years. Jaden Daniels last year.
Yep.
See, build you back up.
Was.
That's what I do. Yeah. 20 wins for Mizzou in these last 2 seasons. When, look, at the start of this 2-year stretch, Brady Cook wasn't even certain that he was going to be able to keep the starting job, and he had to earn it in the season opener. And there were people like me going, see what you got in Sam Horn. Just kind of roll that out. Brady Cook deserves so much credit for this 2-year stretch, even though this year obviously did not end with a 12-team playoff berth. At least we don't think it will, obviously. Great career, great response in this one. That play to your boy Weiss.
That boy
You texted me that exact thing.
He's been cooking, man. I'm telling you,
played really well.
Key to their offense, man. Maybe they figured that out sooner. They would have losses. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe,
he's been cooking lately.
Because it was definitely a quiet day for Luther Burden after he had his shirt off in the warm-ups. Maybe that's going to hurt Luther Burden's draft stock a little bit. You can't be shirtless guy in the snow in warm-ups and then come out in sleeves and not play well.
Yep.
Slight knock. I've said a lot of nice things about Luther Burden. I don't like that. Not crazy about that.
Whole NFC North, they're out.
Now, 3 of them playing domes, or 2 of them playing domes, and 3 of them
the other one
maybe
is Dan
eventually.
Campbell. He's out too.
Yeah.
Sleeves. He's Dan Campbell's ripping his arms off. Anyway.
Luther Burden, Monroe St. Brown. I don't think they're going to be playing together, but that'd be a fun duo to be able to watch. I hope for Mizzou's sake, after watching that it can get to a Florida bowl game. Just after the snow that it endured. Good for Mizzou. One thing on Arkansas, by the way, that Landon Jackson injury, the projected first-round pick, the guy who came back for his senior year, the former LSU transfer, super, super scary. Glad he was able to travel back with the team, but one of those kind of hold-your-breath moments, a long, long delay where he was like moving his foot, just the type of play that can happen on any given instant playing in this sport. And hopefully he is going to be all right, because that guy has meant a lot to this team over the course of the last couple of years. But hate that Arkansas's day, ultimately they weren't able to win it for him. And this was not necessarily the day that Hog fans had hoped for, to be able to kind of break this skid against Mizzou in Columbia.
Yeah, real quick, that two teams that were so fun to watch in that game, having Mizzou score with like just under the 2-minute timeout left, and just watching Taylor Green look like a trebuchet on Rockets, running around, fourth down, doesn't care, getting the snot knocked out of him, solid into his career as well. That was must-see TV at the end. So what a classic game. I kind of like this rivalry. Moving on.
Battle Line has won you over? It has?
Good. We should just combine all the trophies with the one that LSU has with Arkansas, build a giant boot. Anyway.
There we go. I like that. That seems fun. I don't know if there's a trophy case that can hold that, but yeah, I'm here for it. All right, we're going to kind of whip through these last four games here. Florida and Florida State. Credit Mike Norvell. We gave him some credit earlier. We're going to give him some credit again. He showed a lot of fight. Mm-hmm. Granted, it was when the game was already over, and he was upset that Florida planted its flag on the field. Billy Napier was upset about that too, for what it's worth. But for Florida State, look, beggars can't be choosers. I think FSU fans will take that. You know, it wasn't like they were going to win the game on the field. Might as well try and win it afterwards. Better chance of doing that. I don't know if they did that either, but DJ Lagway didn't even play that well against the Florida State defense that still gave a crap. Still played hard, I thought, in this one. Still made his unreal plays, of course, but not the best DJ Lagway showing, I actually thought. I thought they left some points out there. Still, some of those throws to DK were silly. Just absolutely silly. Interception was wrong route by a receiver. Actually like that Lagway kind of blew up at the guy. That's a true freshman that's clearly recognizing what went wrong and why there were two guys in the same exact spot that pick that he threw in the end zone. But Florida defense, really, really, really solid performance against an overmatched FSU offense.
Fumbles.
How do you fumble the football 8 times in a game that doesn't even have the conditions for it?
This game was in Florida, not in the snow. They fumbled 8 times. Gus will fix this. God, I can't wait for that. That's going to be fun. That's going to be really, really fun to talk about. I'm looking forward to actually the UCF job search. That might be something that we have to talk about in one of these pods in December here. Although they're probably going to fill that spot in the next week or so. But yeah, Billy gets his first win against Florida State. Closes the regular season by beating LSU, Ole Miss, and FSU. The 5-game gauntlet that we talked about so much in the preseason, he went 3-2 against. Yeah.
Usually when coaches say, I wish we had a few more weeks to be able to play because, we're really coming to our own, kind of roll my eyes. It's like, all right, you won like 1 or 2 games down the stretch. I do wish that we could see more of this Florida team play. I wish Florida and South Carolina and Arizona State, these teams are just peaking at the right time. If they, not playing in the playoff, I wish that we could just watch them in some sort of play-in tournament or something like that. How fun that would be. But unfortunately for Florida, obviously that is not going to be the conversation. But still, a really nice little window that they have right now at 7-5. Continue to do well in recruiting. They can find some portal guys who are going to be really valuable playing for DJ Lagway. I think they should be in a good spot at receiver 2 with Trey Wilson coming back next year. It's wild that Florida became actually a fun team to watch. Well, Billy Napier is even going to get some SEC Coach of the Year love. I know I already gave it out to Shane Beamer, but he's at least going to be part of those conversations. Maybe he wins a share. How about it? I mean, just did not expect this type of ending for this Florida team. And I know we've talked a lot about it, so we don't have to beat a dead horse. But still, beating a rival by 20 points, that's still significant, even if Florida State is the basura-ist of basura.
I say this unironically. If you spend the first half of your year getting together buyout money for your coach, you look around and suddenly have lots of NIL money to spend.
That's a good point.
Florida they got some funds now. They're like, actually, guys, we're giving you a discount. Now, this is a fourth of what you thought you'd be paying. Let's get some receivers. So they're actually kind of set right now. Yeah.
They're going to spend. And that was the Pete Thamel thing about it was 70% of their money tied to freshmen and sophomores, but they're going to spend in the portal. And I would expect with early signing day coming up on Wednesday, by the way. Yeah, earlier than ever.
Enough.
Yeah, seriously. They're going to be definitely spending and making some heavy moves here. All right, Oklahoma, LSU. Kirby has not Kirby. My bad. Brian Kelly, very much not Kirby. He's turned me into a moron, and I guess that's part of it because I just butchered his name. I think I picked 5 consecutive LSU games incorrectly to close the regular season. I know you had talked about that as well.
You did one worse than me, buddy. So trust me, the amount of dialed in really only makes it a little bit better.
I don't know, man. Tough team to figure out, but LSU wins this game convincingly. I thought it was going to be a fun back and forth, and they kind of pulled away. LSU gets to 8-4. Oklahoma looked like it left all of its good plays in Norman from Alabama last week. Well, when R. Mason Thomas took down Nussmeier and he kind of lands on top of him, and he went to the locker room with an apparent clavicle injury. They're talking about on the broadcast. Jordan was saying like, "Is this? I think this is going to be a real serious deal." Was there any part of you that thought this dude is about to come back and go 10 for 10 and look like the best version of Garrett Nussmeier?
Not even a little bit. I showed you our Airbnb, and there's like, a projector outside that I had got figured out. It's my mom's birthday, so I did it big, decided to just get us all one Airbnb in New Orleans. And I'm sitting there, and, my mom is sitting there going, well, I don't know about Nussmeier. He had that fumble, will probably be okay. Swan comes in for a drive. I'm like, please apologize to this man. I'm like, and then Nussmeier comes out, rips these darts to Chris Hilton. I mean, look, again, what we owe Brad Kelly an apology about, Chris Hilton learned how to jump. Say what you will. Oh, Brian Kelly, he's out of touch. He's yelling at his players. Tell the guy to jump correctly. Because
they showed the clip from the Florida game. They showed the clip, and they're like, hey, look what he's doing now. He's catching touchdown passes. He's making big-time plays. Just needed to be yelled at.
And conversely, Nuss comes to the sideline. He's not yelling at him at all. Maybe he knows a thing or two about football, this Brian Kelly. But anyway, yeah, go back to the Wisconsin game last year in the bowl game. That was the Nussmeier start. Gave everybody a lot of hope. Had 2 touchdowns to Chris Hilton. If these receivers could just all be on the field and not doing the dumbest thing you've ever seen, pretty good offense. We saw that. I think the defense came, I hate to credit a players only meeting because that's the most overdone trope in sports. But looks like the leadership on this team decided they were going to show up, for these last 2 games, and credit to them. Josh Williams, looks like Caden Durham has a little bit of an injury. Sage Ryan played well. Major Burns almost had a pick in this game. These seniors really, these upperclassmen have stayed up to the point where we were talking about, they're losers. At that point, that was going to be the story of this class, and they realized it, and they called a little Shaq-style timeout, and they got it all together. I can't be more thrilled about how this defense is flying to the ball. We've discovered another Weeks brother. There's 3 of them now. I think that powered him up. He had 15 tackles.
They're the Doyle family, Will.
Dude, there's going to be 3 weeks. We need a term for that. 3 weeks in the same team. But anyway, so great performance at LSU. Great showing for Oklahoma in the SEC. You beat Alabama. Tough to do that 2 weeks in a row. Yeah.
Huge for LSU, too, to not have the regular season end on just a sour note as the portal window opens, as you're trying to play a bowl game. Yeah, early signing period. Obviously, the Bryce Underwood stuff, that is what it is at this point. But it could definitely have been a lot worse. And instead, LSU is sitting there in a spot where you can potentially get a 9th win in a bowl game. They're going to spend a ton of money in the portal this offseason. They will be one of the biggest spenders as well. And if they don't, Brian Kelly will be writing his own obituary.
Yep.
That's just the case for this team. But nice way to be able to end the regular season with 2 home victories against frisky teams, but ultimately teams that were not able to pull off upsets. Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Egg Bowl. I hated how little this felt like the Egg Bowl. Got a little chippy. It was a little bit weird early on. But a Friday afternoon game in this one didn't feel right. Sun needs to be down. People need to be angry. We need to have shots in the stands of people that just hate each other. No fake dog
we
food
need
celebration.
A coffee shop, talking some smack. Bo Wallace throwing some punches. We wasn't weird enough.
Joe Moorhead, drag my Yankee, you know what, out of here. We needed. By the way, Joe Moorhead. I don't know if it was the Akron social team getting together with Joe Moorhead after they beat Toledo, aka the team that beat Mississippi State. But you pointed that out to me. Maybe. Who knows? Joe's
game.
Big revenge game for Joe it was. But I was honestly, I was kind of annoyed watching the Ole Miss offense. I was. Yeah. I know Ole Miss gets to win this game. You win the Egg Bowl. Don't necessarily take rivalry week wins for granted. But even the great plays were annoying because your boy Ulysses Bentley goes off after the most bizarre season ever that he was in the doghouse and nobody knows why. And he has these first 2 carries to start off the game, and Ole Miss's crowd sarcastically cheers. And he rips off, what was that, like an 89-yard touchdown?
Again.
Why? I joked that after he ripped off the long touchdown that he was going to go put Lane directly under the hoop just so that he could dunk on him.
It's just Vince Carter him.
I wouldn't have blamed him. I wouldn't have. And, don't you know it, Ole Miss finally gets the ground attack going with Bentley kind of being the feature back. If there's any guess that I have, and I brought this up before, Lane has talked about how he's kind of frustrated with how east to west his rushing style is, and he's not as north to south as he would like. Whatever.
As an opposing fan, please keep thinking that. He sure got east to west on LSU. Nobody's never bring him out again. You got it. It was a hashtag free do. Look, the players might have had a point there. That guy is an explosive athlete.
Probably should have gotten a little bit more run. Maybe he helped you close out some of these games. Just saying. Whatever the case, good for Jackson Dart that he got to go out like that. Emotional, long embrace with Lane before he talked to our friend Chris Budden in the post game. Lane was kind of like, "Hey, you got a post game interview to do right now. Like, we'll talk afterwards. It'll be fine. We'll get our moment, but just go do your thing." Jackson Dart left the door open for the playoff, but he knows very well his team's playoff hopes died in the swamp. Okay, great for Ole Miss. That disappointing year is 9-3, but look. I think it's fair to wonder if they're a Trey Harris injury away from making the playoff and being a real threat. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but they were never supposed to be this dependent on one player, even if that is the case. And that's more of the troubling thing and more of the annoying, frustrating thing with this team, even in a victory like this one, kind of a ho-hum, grinded out win against an overmatched Mississippi State squad in year 0 of the Jeff Lebby era. I just thought there'd be more versatility on offense for Ole Miss, and that was not the case. It's just going to feel like an opportunity missed. And I know we've talked about that, so we don't necessarily need to repeat that. I know we talked about that a lot after the Florida game.
Yeah, and hey, good news for you, Ole Miss. You're the best you've been consistently, and you're the largest difference between you guys and Mississippi State I think I've ever seen. So that's pretty massive. Like if you got 2 goals, you're a good team, you're a consistent team, you're way better than your rival. Let's call it 3.
Very, very interested to get the vibe of the Grove Collective after this year. Money well spent in some places, not as much in others. Portal will still elevated your floor, but yeah, very, very interested to see if they go quite as portal heavy, if they have the resources to be able to make that happen. We will see.
But hey, better than Matt Luke. Everything's relative, I mean, for Ole Miss, this is a pretty good year.
Matt Luke actually had a pretty solid day coaching up that Clemson offensive line against those, as you would call them, South Carolina swamp monsters.
Monsters, yep.
Matt Luke had himself a nice little Saturday, even if Clemson didn't. All right, last one here. Louisville and Kentucky. Mark Stoops no longer owns Louisville. Confirmed. Too bad for him. Cutter Bowley's first start did not go as planned at all. Turnovers, injury, brutal development. Just Kentucky was hoping to have hope and hoping to see a quarterback of the future look the part. Stoops has, a quarterback situation that he's going to kind of have to figure out. I still would think they're going to go all in with Cutter Bowley, but limited optimism. He's got another offensive coordinator that everybody wants fired in Bush Hamden, and that's not great. He so desperately wants to keep an OC. I cannot emphasize that enough. I think Stoops would rather call Kentucky a basketball school than have to hire another OC. But sometimes the situation calls for it, and that's what he might end up having to do. We're recording this on Sunday morning. But the passing attack was just so bad for Kentucky, and Louisville just dominated this game. Bottom 25 in FBS, Kentucky was in passing yards per game and quarterback rating, mostly with Brock Vandegrift. 7 passing plays of 30 yards against SEC competition. Stoops was told in 2021, hey, you got to modernize this offense. You got to revolutionize it, and you'll see the passing game take off. You were told you're going to have a perfect complement for your defense, and I would argue that 2021 was the last time that Kentucky had a passing game that was kind of anywhere close of meeting expectations. And that exceeded it, but even that took a little bit to get going. That was the first year of Will Levis. Yet twice, you lose an OC to the NFL. You're kind of in the worst spot. It's one thing if you have an OC that just takes off and he's awesome. And I would argue that was year 1 with Liam Cohen in 2021. And if that's what's happening every single year, all right, you can kind of tolerate that. You're doing some things well, but that just hasn't been the case. And that group is kind of without answers at this point. That's really troubling for Kentucky, even upperclassmen. I think Kentucky's going to see some upperclassmen hit the portal and look for greener pastures. Not great to finish 4-8 for this team when they used to have such a higher floor than this. And that floor consisted of beating Louisville, even if Louisville was good, like last year. Yeah. And this game was not that. Great for Tyler Shuck, though. Nice game for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty rare that you see a team lose the turnover margin this badly, where it's 5-1, and also lose the possession margin this badly by about 10 points. And the way you do that is convert 0 third downs and 0 fourth downs. That's about
Hard
what
to
I got
do.
for you there.
Hard to do.
You at least sit on the ball when you have that many turnovers. Yeah, it's like, weird, bad offense. I'm lost, and we have lots of stuff. Both Stoops and us have lots of time to talk about this Kentucky offense because it's not getting better overnight.
Yeah, a lot of questions that will be asked in Lexington. All right, let's close by predicting the top 12 of the CFP. Well, I think let's start with one. We'll start with one. We won't start with 12. Oregon's going to be 1. I think Texas will be 2. Penn State at 3. Gasp. Notre Dame at 4. Yeah, how about that? Georgia at 5. Ohio State at 6. Tennessee at 7. SMU at 8. Indiana at 9. I think those are the playoff berths that are absolutely locked in. Okay, maybe some will push back on that. And then Boise State, I think, will be at 10. And if you subscribe to the belief of you shouldn't be knocked out of the top 12 by losing a conference title game, maybe that's different because if UNLV wins that game, nobody's talking about Barry Odom's team. If they win that game, then that kind of takes their spot. So maybe there's an exception to that rule, but we'll see how high Boise State's ranked. And then Miami at 11. And I'm going to say South Carolina at 12.
Hey.
But it doesn't mean South Carolina gets in, because obviously things would have to bounce their way during conference championship weekend. And the Big 12 champ, not part of that top 12, is going to earn one of those spots as one of the highest ranked conference champs. Hard to pick against Arizona State at this point. Mm-hmm. Really hard to pick against Arizona State. But yeah, I think South Carolina, I think they're going to get rewarded. And I think they're going to jump Bama and Ole Miss, but still potentially be on the outside looking in. Gosh, it sounds like I just totally contradicted myself. I did.
Dude, again, this I kind of almost hope every year isn't this crazy, because I just, like I said, I've given up these next 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, well, again, conference championship might have all the upsets might happen, and we might just be going, so Mizzou, hold on. Anyway, just kidding about that one.
I don't know that Ohio State should fall. I'm really interested in what happens with Ohio State, obviously. I think that's kind of going to set expectations for a lot of these other teams. And it is important with the home playoff conversation as well. And you want to be able to be in that spot. Ohio State not playing in a Big Ten championship and Penn State playing in a Big Ten championship is so funny. I guarantee you Penn State just had no thoughts whatsoever. And all of a sudden it's like
they're just going to meet at the 50-yard line. Sorry, go ahead.
It's the meme of like, wait, we got to play in the Big Ten championship? What's me? I just got drafted. That's a little sass. Yeah, little sass at Barstool. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna just Penn State and Michigan are gonna meet at the 50-yard line and be like, all right, guys, look, over under like 20, like you each get 10 pass attempts. Okay, we're gonna get this. So do this like men. We all got dinner reservations. Sorry.
Yeah, and, or Ohio State's getting or Oregon and Penn State. Yeah, the Big Ten championship. Yeah.
No, for sure. So, what was I going to say? I'm right there with you. There's a ton of them where there's a ton of different scenarios. I'm really just sitting there going, okay, we'll see. And that's my really deep takeaway here, because this is a crazy year, man. I'm excited that we all got to experience it together, and it's been a lot to keep up with, but appreciate y'all rocking with us.
Yeah, seriously. As we said in the preview pod, appreciate you staying with us this late in the season. Even if your team is not part of these playoff conversations, it's been fun to be able to dissect all of this. We will have a full SEC championship preview this week, talking all things Georgia and Texas. Not sure interview-wise what we're going to be doing yet, but obviously we're probably going to have to discuss something related to the early signing period, because chaos will probably unfold that in some sort of way. So we will still have our normal schedule, even though the regular season is over. That is the plan for now. If you haven't, leave us a 5-star review, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SES Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ Guerrero, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.